Nora Bellamy carried 2 coffees and a stack of NDAs into the boardroom of the company she built. She set them down where a paper name tag read assistant. 1 cream, no sugar. 1 black. She placed them in front of the men who were about to pitch her invention to a room full of money. Nobody looked up. She was fetching coffee for the people selling the things she made with her own hands. Then she corrected a wrong number. Just 1. A small technical figure on a slide, stated backward. And VP Trevor Kane, in front of 22 investors, smiled the way you smile at a child and said, "Sweetheart, let the engineers talk." The room laughed. She didn't flush. She didn't leave. She reached into her bag for a battered tin. Old, dented, taped at one corner. And across the table, the chief technology officer went very still. The tin did not open. Not yet. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have looked closer, this story is for you. Before we go on, if stories like this one find you where you need them, subscribe and comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Tell me where you are, then stay with me, because what's inside that tin has been waiting 9 years to be opened, and the man who took it never once thought to ask what she kept. Let me take you back to the morning of that meeting, and before it, to the 4 years that made it possible. Aperion Health sat in a glass building on the north edge of Austin, Texas. 6 floors of white desks and standing lamps, and people who spoke in acronyms. The company made one thing that mattered, a patch called the Lumen, a small, soft square you pressed to your arm, and it read your blood sugar all day, without a single needle. No pinprick, no blood, just a quiet number on your phone, hour after hour, keeping you alive. For a diabetic, that patch was a different kind of life, and Aperion was 9 days from going public. 9 days from a valuation of $3.1 billion. There were banners in the lobby already. There was a countdown on the break room screen. Nora got in at 6:40. She always did. The first thing she did was the demo fridge. It sat by the front conference room, glass-fronted, and it held the display units, the sample patches, the calibration vials, the little branded water bottles for guests. Overnight, the vials had drifted out of order. She lined them up again by lot number. She wiped a smudge off the glass with her sleeve. She checked the temperature log and initialed it. NB. Nobody asked her to do that. She just knew that if a vial sat 2 degrees warm, the demo would read soft, and someone would blame the product instead of the fridge. She'd learned that the hard way, a long time ago. Then she went up to format Kane's slides. Trevor Kane could not build a deck to save his life. He typed in 3 fonts and left numbers unrounded and once, memorably, put a decimal in the wrong place in front of the board. So the slides came to Nora. She fixed the alignment. She matched the colors to the brand book. She read every technical claim to make sure it was true, because that was a habit she could not switch off, even now. On slide 11, there was a specificity figure for the enzyme layer. 94%, it said. She stopped. The real number was 97.2. She knew it the way you know your own birthday. She had measured it herself, on a bench, at 2 in the morning, more times than she could count. 94 was wrong. It was the old prototype number from before she solved the drift. She left a comment in the margin. Small, polite figure should read 97.2, happy to source. She did not change the slide. She had learned not to change the slide. Her badge, clipped to her collar, said executive assistant, under a photo where she wasn't quite smiling. She'd worn it every day for 4 years, and she barely felt it anymore. It was just the color of her mornings now. On her way through the lobby, she passed the plaque. There was a row of framed things on the east wall. Awards, a magazine cover, and at the end, half in shadow behind a ficus that needed water, a framed copy of the company's first patent, the foundational one, the one everything else was built on. It had hung there since the early days, when the company was 11 people and a rented lab, and nobody had read it in years. The inventor's name on it was N. Okafor. Nora reached out and straightened the frame. It always went crooked. The building settled, or the cleaners knocked it, and it drifted a quarter-inch off level, and she fixed it. She'd been fixing it for 4 years. It was a small, private thing she did. No one had looked at those names in a long time. No one connected N. Okafor on a dusty patent to Bellamy, the assistant who brought the coffee. Okafor was the name she was born with. Bellamy was the name she married into and kept after the marriage ended, because her son had it too. She straightened the frame and walked on. Her phone buzzed in the elevator. A text from Daniel's school. Not an emergency, she checked those in half a second now. A reflex from the asthma years. Just a note. His teacher had done a unit on jobs, on what parents did. And Daniel, 12 years old, had been asked what his mother did for work. He'd said, "She helps the smart people." The teacher thought it was sweet. She'd written it down to share. Nora stood in the elevator and read it twice. She helps the smart people. She didn't cry. She'd stopped doing that too. But something in her chest folded over quietly, and she put the phone back in her pocket, and the doors opened, and she went to work. You should understand how she got here. Because it wasn't an accident. 4 years ago, Nora Bellamy was the founding sensor engineer of Aperion Health. Not a founder in the money sense. She never held much stock. But the sensor, the actual reason the patch worked, the enzyme layer that read glucose through skin without drift, that was hers. Her design. Her nights. Her math. And 4 years ago, Trevor Kane wanted to cut a corner. There was a coating on the sensor, a protective enzyme membrane. Kane wanted to thin it to speed up manufacturing and hit a launch date. Nora ran the numbers and told him, in writing, that thinning it would let the reading drift after about 10 days. Drift meant a diabetic might dose insulin off a wrong number. Drift meant somebody could get hurt. She flagged it. She put it in an email. She used the word unsafe, which you are not supposed to use in a company 9 days from a launch. 6 weeks later, there was a reorganization. A gentle word. Her title changed. Her lab access changed. Her sensor became, in the slide decks and the press, Trevor Kane's architecture. And Nora Bellamy became an executive assistant. To the CTO, a quiet parking space where a difficult woman couldn't slow anything down. She could have fought it. People asked her later why she didn't. Here's the honest answer. Daniel had asthma. Bad that year. 3 trips to the ER, 1 overnight. The insurance was through Aperion, and it was good insurance, and a lawsuit takes years and money and certainty, and she had none of the second and not much of the first. So she made a decision that a lot of people make and never talk about. She swallowed it. She kept the badge. She kept the coverage. And she told herself the thing she'd always believed, the thing her mentor once told her. The work will speak for itself. That was her blind spot, though she didn't know the word for it yet. Somewhere in those 4 years, because she believed the work would speak, she stopped speaking for it. She went quiet. She let the coffee be the job. She let N. Okafor gather dust behind a ficus. And the world took her exactly at the price she named. Now it was 9 days to the IPO, and the price was about to change. The week of the meeting, Kane rehearsed his pitch out loud, in the big conference room over and over, to an empty table and a mirror. Nora was in the corner, sorting handouts. "The Lumen represents my sensor architecture," Kane said to the mirror. "A ground-up rethink of continuous glucose monitoring." He rolled the words. He liked them. "My enzyme layer resists the drift that plagued earlier devices." My, Nora sorted the handouts and said nothing. That was the arrangement. But then he asked her, not for her opinion, never that, he asked her to fix a chart. The drift chart, the one that showed the Lumen holding steady where competitors fell off. And on that chart, the axis was mislabeled. Days flipped with weeks. It made the product look worse than it was. Trevor, she said, careful, low, the x-axis. It's in weeks. Your data's in days. It should be days. He didn't even turn around. It's fine. Just make it look clean. It'll read wrong to an engineer. Eleanor Vance was an engineer. Nora, now he turned. He smiled. That was the worst part, always, the smile. Make it look clean. That's the job. She made it look clean. She left the axis wrong, because he told her to, and she wrote herself a small note to raise it once more before the meeting, and she never got the chance. 2 things happened that week that she didn't tell anyone about. The first was the drawer. She was pulling old badges from a supply drawer. They were doing new photos for the IPO, fresh lanyards. The whole company reissued. And in the back of the drawer, under a rubber band, was her old ID. From the early days. She'd forgotten it existed. It said Nora Okafor, founding engineer, and someone she knew whose handwriting she'd formatted his slides for 4 years. Someone had drawn a thick black marker line through founding engineer. Just crossed it out. Like a mistake, like a typo. The word underneath still readable through the ink, if you tilted it to the light. She held it for a while. Then she put it in her bag. She didn't know why. She just couldn't leave it in the drawer. The second thing happened in the hallway. The CTO, her actual boss, a decent enough man named Prakash, who mostly left her alone, caught her by the printers. He was frowning at his phone. He had a call in 10 minutes with a supplier about the membrane. Nora, he said quiet, so no one heard. The enzyme layer. When we cure it, is it the temperature that sets the drift resistance or the cure time? I always mix them up. Both, she said. But temperature dominates. You hold it at 40 for the full cure, you're fine. Rush the temperature to save time, the cross-linking's incomplete, and it drifts around day 10. Time you can cheat a little. Temperature you cannot. He nodded like she'd handed him a map in the dark. Temperature dominates. Right, thank you. And he went off to his call, repeating it under his breath. Temperature dominates. And he sounded exactly like a man who'd just gotten the answer from the one person who knew. An hour later, in the same hallway, that same man walked past her toward the boardroom without a glance. She was carrying coffee. He was carrying his laptop. And the space between them was the whole story of 4 years. She noticed. She always noticed. She just didn't say anything. Then came the meeting. The pre-IPO investor meeting was the big one, the one the whole 9 days pointed at. 22 people around and behind the long glass table, and more on a screen, and the light coming in low and gold off the west windows. There was a fresh smell of coffee and printer toner and money. Grant Halloran ran it. The CEO. Telegenic, silver at the temples, a man built for magazine covers, and for saying the word journey without irony. He wanted the 3.1 billion. He wanted the cover. He had, Nora knew, never once read the patent chain his whole prospectus rested on. He trusted that it was there the way you trust the floor. Priya Rao was there, outside IP counsel, brought in to run the due diligence, a small, sharp woman with a laptop she never quite closed. Her job was a clean filing, a clean chain of title. She asked precise questions and wrote precise notes, and did not laugh at anyone's jokes. And Eleanor Vance was there, the lead investor, ex-engineer decades ago, before the money. On the board now. She was the one whose wire made the whole thing real, and she was the kind of person who wanted the truth before she sent it. She sat with her reading glasses down her nose and her arms crossed, and a look that said she'd seen a lot of decks, and believed about half of what any of them said. Nora's job in that room was to keep the coffee full and the handouts flowing, and to be, as much as a human being can be, furniture. Kane pitched. He was good at the pitch. She'd give him that. He had a voice for it. He walked the room through the market and the moat and the my sensor architecture, and the investors nodded, and Halloran beamed, and it was going beautifully. Then Eleanor Vance uncrossed her arms. "I have a technical question," she said. "The enzyme layer. Your whole moat is that it resists drift where the others fail. So explain the mechanism to me. Why doesn't yours drift?" Specifically, the room went a little quieter. This was the question. This was the one that mattered. From the one who mattered. Kane smiled. "Great question, Eleanor. It's the proprietary membrane. The architecture. We've engineered the layer to be more stable, more robust. It's really a ground-up. That's not a mechanism," Eleanor said. "That's a brochure. I was building sensors when you were in middle school. Why doesn't it drift? What's happening chemically after day 10 that isn't happening in the competitor's device?" And Trevor Kane, VP of Product, the man who'd claimed the invention for 4 years, opened his mouth. And nothing came out. Because he didn't know. He had never known. He could pitch the Lumen. He could not explain it. He'd pointed at the corner Nora once tried to protect and called it his vision. And now a real engineer was asking him the one question underneath the brochure, and there was nothing there. He said something about cross-stability. It wasn't a word. Eleanor's eyebrow went up a half-inch, which on Eleanor was a slammed door. Nora was at the sideboard, setting down a fresh carafe. She didn't decide to speak. That's the truth of it. 4 years of quiet. And the thing that broke it wasn't courage or a plan. It was just that a wrong number was sitting in the air, and someone had asked the right question, and her whole body had been built to answer it. It came out of her the way your hand comes off a hot stove. "It's the enzyme cross-linking," she said. The room turned. The membrane's cured at a controlled temperature, so the enzyme layer cross-links completely. A competitor's layer is set faster, so the linking's partial. Around day 10, the incomplete bonds relax, and the reading drifts high. Ours doesn't drift because the cross-linking's already saturated on day 1. There's nothing left to relax. That's the whole moat. It's not the architecture. It's the cure. Silence. Eleanor Vance looked at her. Really looked. The first time anyone in that room had looked at her all day. "That," she said slowly, "is a mechanism." And Trevor Kane said, "Sweetheart, let the engineers talk." The room laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, most of it. That's what she'd remember. It was worse than cruel. It was easy. It was 22 people who had already decided who she was. The coffee, the badge, the furniture, and a VP had made a little joke to smooth over a bad moment, and they laughed because it was easier than looking at what had just happened. "Sweetheart, let the engineers talk." And the woman who just explained the engineering better than the engineer got folded back into the wallpaper with one word and a wave. Grant Halloran did the smoothest thing of all. He smiled at her. Warm, apologetic, dismissing, he tilted his head toward the door. Just slightly. "The gesture you make to a waiter you're done with. Thank you. That's all for now." She could have taken it. She'd taken it for 4 years. She had one foot toward the door already, coffee carafe still in her hand, the old reflex carrying her out. And then she stopped. She set the carafe down on the sideboard. Gently, she turned back to the room. "Actually," Nora said, "I'd like to stay. As a courtesy." 2 minutes. Nobody quite knew what to do with that. It wasn't a scene. Her voice was mild. She wasn't angry. She just didn't leave. She pulled out a chair at the far end, the wrong end, the end no one sat at, and she sat down, and she folded her hands, and she stayed. Eleanor Vance watched her sit. And then Eleanor turned to Priya Rao and said something, low, that Nora couldn't hear. And Priya wrote it down. Kane pushed on. He recovered the pitch. He was good at recovering. But the temperature of the room had changed, and everyone felt it and no one named it, and Nora sat at the wrong end of the table with her hands folded and her heart going hard, and she watched the man sell her sensor to a room that had just laughed at her for explaining it. That was the wound. Same room. Same light. Same 22 faces. Remember them. Every one of them will be back. She drove home that evening the long way. She didn't cry in the car. She wanted to, and she didn't. Instead, she thought about a garage 12 years ago, before Daniel, before Bellamy, when she was still just Nora Okafor with a soldering iron and a problem she couldn't put down. The Lumen didn't start at Aperion. It started on a workbench in a rented garage off a highway, under a light that hummed, with a mentor named Sam Okonkwo leaning over her shoulder saying, "Slower, slower, you'll burn the trace." Sam was old even then. He'd built pacemaker components for 30 years, and he'd taken one look at Nora fresh out of grad school and decided she was the one he'd teach the last of it to. They built the first patch by hand. Not a factory, not a lab. 2 people, and a bench, and 1,000 failures. The enzyme layer that the whole $3 billion company now rested on. She'd figured out the cure temperature at 2 in the morning after burning through her savings, when a batch that should have drifted didn't, and she'd stood there holding it and started laughing and couldn't stop, and Sam had made tea to celebrate at 2:15 in the morning like it was noon. The first working patch, the very first one that held steady for 30 days. Sam soldered a little backplate on it so it wouldn't come apart, and he put it in a tin. An old pastille tin, dented, the paint half worn off. "Keep the first one," he told her. "You always keep the first one. It reminds you it was you." And then Sam did the thing that mattered most, though she didn't understand how much for years. He made her file the patent in her own name, not the company's, not a co-inventor's. Hers alone. Sam had been burned once, decades back, signed his best work away for a paycheck, watched another man's name go on it, watched the royalties go to a boardroom he was never invited into. He wasn't going to let it happen to her. "List yourself as sole inventor," he told her. "Sign nothing that gives it away without reading every line. And keep the assignment papers. Keep them somewhere they can take a coffee, but they can't take a patent." He'd smiled at his own joke. He was dying by then, though she didn't know it. Pancreatic, he filed the patent with her, walked her through the assignment terms line by line, insisted on a royalty clause, 4% of net sales, in perpetuity, to the inventor. And then, a few months later, he was gone. She'd been so grieved, and then so busy, and then the company had grown up around the thing they built, and she'd let it all recede. She trusted the floor, too. She'd signed things over the years, quickly, the way you do, in the rush of a growing company. But some things she'd never signed. Sam had made her promise, and she'd kept the promise the way you keep a dead man's instructions, half without understanding, because he'd been so sure. The papers were in the tin, under the first patch, in a drawer in her kitchen. She hadn't opened it in years. Back in the boardroom that same afternoon, after Nora had gone home, Eleanor Vance stayed behind. She caught Priya Rao at the elevator. "The assistant," Eleanor said. "The one who explained the enzyme layer. Better than Kane, incidentally, which is a separate problem I want to discuss with this board." Priya waited. "Before diligence closes," Eleanor said, "pull the inventor of record on the foundational patent. The actual USPTO filing, not the summary and the prospectus. The real record. I want to see the name on the original." "Standard chain of titles already in the data room," Priya said. "I don't want the summary. I've been burned by summaries. Pull the filing itself." Eleanor looked back toward the boardroom, toward the empty wrong-end chair. Something in that room today didn't add up. A woman who talks like that doesn't carry coffee by accident. Somebody put her there. I want to know who, and I want to know why, before I wire $300 million into it. Priya Rao, who liked clean filings and disliked surprises, made a note. She'd pull it in the morning, before the reconvened diligence session. Just to be safe. Just to close the loop. She had no idea what loop she was about to open. That night, Nora made Daniel his dinner. Mac and cheese, The boxed kind he liked, though she could have made better. She watched him eat and do his homework at the counter and tell her about a kid named Marcus who could do a backflip. She loved him so much in that kitchen that it hurt. "Mom," he said, not looking up. "What do you actually do?" "Like at work. Cassie's mom is a nurse." I didn't really know what to say. She almost said it. She almost told him. But he was 12, and it was late, and how do you explain 4 years of a swallowed life to a child eating mac and cheese? "I help make something that helps sick people," she said. "A patch. For people whose blood sugar's dangerous, it means they don't have to poke themselves with needles all day." He looked up. "That's kind of cool, actually. It's kind of cool," she agreed. He went to bed. She washed the pot. And then she stood in the quiet kitchen with her hands still wet. And she thought about the wrong number in the air that afternoon, and Sam's voice saying, "Keep the first one. It reminds you it was you." And the black marker line through founding engineer. And she opened the drawer. The tin was in the back, under a stack of old warranty cards and a spare set of keys. Dented, half the paint gone. Exactly as Sam had left it. She put it on the kitchen table and sat down in front of it. For a long moment she didn't open it. She just looked at it. This small object that had followed her through a marriage and a divorce and 4 moves and 4 years of being furniture. And she felt Sam in the room, and her own younger self, the one who laughed at 2 in the morning over a patch that didn't drift. She opened the tin. There it was, the first Lumen. Hand soldered, ugly, the little backplate Sam had put on, the trace she'd nearly burned. 9 years old, and it still held its shape. The thing that started everything, sitting in her palm, light as a coin. And beneath it, folded in thirds, a little yellow at the edges, was the paper. She lifted the patch out and unfolded the paper, and she began to read, and the kitchen was very quiet, and the more she read, the more still she became. The original assignment, Sam's careful language, line by line. Her name at the top, sole inventor. And there, in the middle, the clause he'd insisted on, the one she'd forgotten she owned, 4% of net sales, in perpetuity, payable to the inventor of record. She thought about the countdown screen in the break room. 3.1 billion, 612 million already sold, 4% of that. She did the math the way she did all math, fast and exact, without meaning to. And the number that came out made her set the paper down on the table and press her hand flat over it, as if it might blow away. And there was a second document behind the first. She hadn't remembered a second document. She unfolded it. It was a continuation patent. A newer one, the improvements. The version of the enzyme layer that the current Lumen actually used. The exact product going public in 9 days. It was drafted in her name too. Sam's last work, filed just before he died, covering everything the company was about to sell. She turned to the last page, to the assignment line, the place where the inventor signs the invention over to the company. It was blank. It had never been signed, never assigned. In the rush of a growing company and a dying mentor, and a life she was just trying to hold together, the paper that would have handed the current Lumen to Aperion had never been executed, which meant she still owned it. She still owned the patent covering the exact product they were taking public in 9 days. Nora sat alone at her kitchen table at almost midnight, with the first patch in one hand and a document worth more than the whole company in the other. And she understood, slowly, completely, that in the morning, Priya Rao was going to pull a filing and read a name, and that everything in that glass building was built on top of a woman they'd told to let the engineers talk. She looked at the name on the paper. N. Okafor, the name behind the ficus. The name on the plaque she straightened every morning out of habit. Her hand was steady now. She wasn't going to photocopy it. She wasn't going to leak it or scheme it or hire anyone. She was going to do something much simpler and much more dangerous. She was going to bring the tin to the meeting. And if they asked, she was going to tell the truth. She folded the papers back exactly as Sam had folded them. She set the first patch on top. She closed the lid of the tin, and the small metal click of it was the loudest sound in the house. 9 days to the IPO, 12 hours to the diligence meeting. And for the first time in 4 years, when she thought about walking into that boardroom, Nora Bellamy was not afraid. She was ready. The morning came the way ordinary mornings do. Gray light through the kitchen window, the coffee maker ticking, Daniel eating cereal too fast, backpack already by the door. Nora put the tin in her bag. She did not hide it under anything. She set it on top, where she could feel its weight against the strap. "You're weird today," Daniel said. He said it kindly. "Am I?" "You keep smiling at the toaster." She laughed. It surprised her, the sound of it. "Eat," she said. "You'll miss the bus." He grabbed his jacket. At the door he stopped. "Mrs. Alvarez asked again what you do." "At the company." Nora went still. "What did you tell her?" "That you help the smart people." He shrugged, like it was nothing, like it was just true. "Is that okay?" "That's okay," she said. "Go, bus." The door banged. The house went quiet. Nora stood in the kitchen with her hand on the tin, and she thought, not today it isn't. Today it's going to be something else. She drove to the glass building she had walked into for 12 years. She badged in at the turnstile, executive assistant under her photograph, and she crossed the lobby the way she crossed it every morning. Past the ficus. Past the framed patent on the east wall, the one no one read, the one that said N. Okafor in small dry letters behind the leaves. She stopped. She always straightened it out of habit. This time she looked at the name. She looked at it like it was a stranger's name and her own name at once. Which it was. "Good morning, Miss Bellamy," the front desk said. "Good morning," she said, and she went up. The diligence meeting reconvened at 9 in the boardroom on the top floor. The same long table, the same wall of Austin sky. 22 investors had been there the day before. This morning it was smaller, tighter, the people who mattered. Grant Halloran at the head, telegenic even at 9 a.m., the man whose face would be on the cover the week of the IPO. Trevor Kane, to his right, VP of Product, the man who had told her to let the engineers talk. Prakash, the CTO, her boss, quiet as always. Eleanor Vance, lead investor, ex-engineer, the only one in the room who had looked uneasy the day before. And Priya Rao, outside counsel, laptop open, a legal pad squared to the table edge. Nora came in with the coffee, because that was still her job. She set the tray on the side table. She poured. She was invisible, and she used the invisibility to look at every face in the room, slowly, the way you memorize something before it changes. "Let's get through chain of title," Priya said. "I want the foundational patent confirmed before anything moves. The prospectus summary references it. But I pull originals, always. It's all on the deck," Kane said. "I don't diligence off a deck." Priya did not look up. 9 days to the IPO. $3.1 billion. I read the actual filing. Eleanor Vance folded her hands. "Read it out loud," she said. "Humor me." Priya turned her laptop. She had the USPA record open. The real one. The government page with the government seal. She began to read. "Patent for a needle-free continuous enzymatic glucose sensor. Filed 12 years ago. Assignee, Aperion Health." She scrolled. "Inventor of record." She paused. "Sole inventor," Priya said. N. Okafor. The room did the small thing rooms do when a name doesn't match the story they've been told. A beat of nothing. Kane reached for his water. "Okafor," Halloran said, easy, smiling, one of the early engineers. "Long gone." "We can pull the assignment, it's clean." "That's me," Nora said. She said it from the side table, coffee pot still in her hand. She said it in the ordinary voice she used to ask if anyone wanted decaf. Every head turned. "Bellamy is my married name," she said. "Okafor is the name I filed under." N. Okafor, that's me." Halloran laughed. It was a good laugh, a practiced one. The laugh that had raised $300 million. "Nora," he said warmly. We're in the middle of something fairly technical here, I know, she said. I wrote it. She set the coffee pot down. She reached into her bag, and she took out the tin. Across the table, Prakash, the CTO, went very still. He knew what the tin was. He was the only one who did. Nora set the tin on the boardroom table. Right in the center, on the polished wood, next to the untouched pens and the bottled water. A battered thing, dented at one corner, the paint worn off the lid. It looked absurd there. It looked like it had wandered in from another life. In a way it had. She opened it. On top, the first patch. Hand-soldered, ugly. A little square of her own history, no bigger than a stamp. Beneath it, folded exactly the way Sam had folded them. The papers. 12 years ago, Nora said, I built this on a garage bench. A man named Sam Okonkwo built it with me. He's dead now. Before he died, he filed the patent, and he filed it in my name, alone. And he made me promise to keep these papers. I never understood why he was so serious about it. I do now. She looked at Kane. For 4 years, she said, you've been selling my signature back to me. You told me to let the engineers talk, so let's talk. Read the first name on the patent, Trevor. Then tell me who's out of her lane. Nobody laughed this time. Kane's face had gone the color of the walls. This is a stunt, he said. Okafor was on the original team. Fine. Teams file jointly all the time. Names get listed, sole inventor, Priya said. Flat, she was still reading her screen. Not joint. Sole, there's one name on the foundational patent, Mr. Kane, and it is not yours. She looked up at him for the first time. Your name is not on this document anywhere. The continuation will get to the continuation. Eleanor Vance had not moved. She was watching Nora with the specific attention of someone who had once, long ago, built things herself. Yesterday, Eleanor said slowly, you explained the enzyme cross-linking. The whole mechanism. You explained it better than anyone in this room. And she nodded at Kane without looking at him, told you to let the engineers talk. And you set down the coffee, and you left. I didn't leave, Nora said. I stayed, as a courtesy. For 2 minutes. You may not have noticed. I noticed, Eleanor said. I've been thinking about it since. Halloran spread his hands, still trying for the room, still trying to be the biggest warmth in it. Okay, this is an emotional moment, and I respect that. I do. Nora, you've given a lot to this company, but we are 9 days from a $3.1 billion public offering, and we cannot grant. Eleanor's voice cut clean across his. Sit down and let her counsel finish reading. He sat down. It was a small thing. It was the first order anyone had given Grant Halloran in that building in a very long time, and he took it. Because Eleanor Vance held the lead check, and the check was not yet wired. Priya kept working. She had 3 windows open now, cross-referencing, the way she'd said she would. Her diligence face gave away nothing. I'm confirming sole inventorship on the foundational patent, she said. That's done. That's on the government record. N. Okafor, sole inventor, filed 12 years ago. She scrolled. Now I'm reading the assignment, the document that transfers the invention from the inventor to the company. She read for a moment in silence. Then she stopped scrolling. There's a royalty clause, Priya said. The room got quieter, if that was possible. The original assignment, Priya said, transfers the patent to Aperion Health in exchange for a royalty. 4% of net sales. In perpetuity. She looked up. In perpetuity. Meaning forever. Meaning for as long as the product sells. She turned to the finance side of the table, to the man who had been silent behind his spreadsheets. How much Lumen has this company sold to date? Total net sales, the number in the prospectus. He didn't want to answer. He answered anyway. $612 million. Priya did the arithmetic out loud, slowly, so no one could pretend not to hear it. 4% of 612 million, she said. That is roughly $24.5 million, owed to the inventor, under a clause the company signed. And, she scrolled, checked, scrolled again. I see no royalty payments to N. Okafor. Anywhere, ever, that clause was, Kane started. You'll want to be careful, Priya said, not unkindly, about finishing that sentence. Nora had not moved from the side table. She was not enjoying it. She had thought, maybe, that she would enjoy it, all those years of swallowing it. And now that it was happening, she felt only a strange, clean quiet, like standing in a room after a long fever breaks. There's more, she said. You should look at the continuation. Kane seized it. Yes, the continuation. The current Lumen isn't the 12-year-old device. It's a completely new architecture. My architecture. The continuation patent covers the product we're taking public. And that's a separate invention, and Do you want to explain how it works? Nora asked. The question was gentle. That was the terrible thing about it. She asked it the way you'd ask a child to show his homework. I'm not going to be quizzed, the enzyme layer drifts, Nora said. Over time. The readings wander. 94% accuracy degrading toward the end of wear. Every continuous sensor in the world has this problem. The Lumen doesn't, or barely does. It holds at 97.2 through the full wear cycle. And that's the whole reason it's worth $3.1 billion instead of nothing. So, if the continuation is your invention, Trevor, tell the room why the enzyme layer stopped drifting. Tell them the fix. You've claimed it for 4 years. Tell them how it works. Silence. It went on. It became its own event. That silence. The way silence does when everyone in a room realizes at the same moment what it means. Kane opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Prakash. Prakash looked at the table. He looked at Halloran. Halloran was studying his own hands. The cross-linking density, Kane said. We increase it's a proprietary process. I'm not going to expose our trade secrets in front of. Priya's already under NDA, Eleanor said quietly. So am I. So is everyone at this table. Say it, Trevor, what's the fix? Kane said nothing. Because he did not know. He had never known. He could pitch it. He could put it on a slide. He had built a career and a demotion and a whole false story on top of a thing he could not explain. And now, in the one room where explaining it mattered, the emptiness where the knowledge should have been made a sound louder than any answer. I'll tell you why it doesn't drift, Nora said. She said it to the investors, not to Kane. There's a sacrificial layer. A second enzyme film underneath the sensing film. It degrades first, on purpose, so the sensing layer stays stable across the wear cycle. It's counterintuitive. You add a part that's designed to fail, so the important part doesn't. I designed it that way 12 years ago and refined it in the continuation. She paused. 4 years ago, I flagged a manufacturing corner someone wanted to cut on that exact layer. To save money. I said if you thin the sacrificial film, the drift comes back. I was told I was being difficult. A few weeks later, I was reorganized into an administrative role. She looked at Kane then. Just once. You cut the corner I flagged, she said, and the drift you can't explain today is the drift I warned you about. I was right then, too. You just weren't listening, because you'd already decided I was the woman who fetches the coffee. Priya closed one laptop window and opened another. This was the one she'd been building toward, and everyone could feel it. I've pulled the continuation patent, she said, the one covering the current generation Lumen, the product going public in 9 days. And it's assigned to Aperion, Halloran said. It came out almost as a prayer. The continuation's assigned to the company. It was drafted, Priya said. It was filed. It names one inventor. She turned the screen. N. Okafor, again Soleil. She scrolled to the last page, to the assignment line, and she stopped. And the assignment, she said, was never executed. The line is blank. There is no signature. The continuation patent covering the exact product this company intends to sell to the public was never transferred to this company. She let it sit. Which means, Priya said, as of this morning, it belongs to the inventor. It belongs to Miss Bellamy, née Okafor. She owns the patent on the thing you're taking public in 9 days. Somebody, one of the investors, said a word under his breath. Somebody else pushed back from the table an inch, as if the table itself had changed. Grant Halloran put both hands flat on the wood, the way a man does when the floor moves. There has to be an implied assignment, work for hire, something. She was an employee. She was a founding engineer who filed in her own name, Priya said, at the direction of a co-inventor who structured it specifically so the patent could not be quietly taken from her. I've seen a lot of chains of title. Mr. Halloran, this one was built by someone who knew exactly what he was protecting. And it wasn't the company. It was her. Sam, Nora thought. You stubborn, careful man. You knew. You always knew. For a moment no one spoke, and in that quiet the whole shape of it settled over the room. 22 investors had watched this woman get told to let the engineers talk. The same people, or the ones who counted among them, were now sitting in the wreckage of that laugh, and turning, one by one, to look at her. Really look. At the woman by the coffee, holding an open tin, whose name was the foundation of everything they'd come to buy. Priya set both hands flat on her closed laptop and addressed the board directly, the way a witness states a fact into a record. I'll be very plain, she said, because you're paying me to be plain. Without an assignment from Miss Bellamy, there is no clean chain of title on the current product. Without a clean chain of title, I cannot certify the diligence. Without certification, there is no IPO on day 10. Not in 9 days. Not at 3.1 billion. Not at all. 612 million already sold sits on a royalty she is owed and hasn't been paid. The company does not own the thing it is selling. That is the situation. I'm not editorializing. That is the situation. Eleanor Vance stood up. She was not a large woman, and she did not raise her voice, but the whole room reoriented toward her the way a room does toward the person holding the money and the truth at the same time. I want to say something to the inventor, Eleanor said. She turned to Nora, not to the assistant, to the inventor. The word was deliberate. I sat here yesterday, Eleanor said, and I watched you explain your own invention, correctly, completely. And I watched a man tell you to let the engineers talk. And I watched this room laugh. And I laughed too. Briefly, I want that on the record. I laughed for about 1 second before something in me said, look closer. I spent 30 years as an engineer before I did this. I of all people should have looked closer. I didn't. I'm asking you, on behalf of this board, to forgive that. And I'm telling the people I invest alongside that the woman they watched pour coffee is the reason any of us are in this room, and they will treat her accordingly from this second forward. She sat down. It was very quiet. Thank you, Nora said. Her voice was not quite steady. She let it not be steady. She had earned a voice that shook. Halloran tried once more. He couldn't help it was who he was. Nora, Miss Bellamy, look, we can fix this. Today, we just need your signature on the assignment, and the royalty gets trued up, and we all walk out of here, and the offering proceeds, and everyone is very, very happy. You need my signature, Nora said. Yes. Say it again. Slowly, so the room hears it. Halloran closed his eyes for a second. He was a smart man in the ways that had always mattered to him, and he understood, finally, the exact geography of where he was standing. He had smiled this woman toward the door. He had waved her out. Now the man who fronted the whole $3.1 billion machine had to ask the woman he'd dismissed to hand him the company. We need you, he said, to license us the patent, on whatever terms your counsel and ours can agree, and to accept the royalties owed. And I would like, the company would like, to ask you to do that. Look at Trevor while you say the terms are mine, Nora said. And Halloran did. He looked at Kane, and everyone understood that a decision had been made in that look, and that the decision had not gone Kane's way. "Trevor," Halloran said, "I think you should step out of the diligence." Kane stood too fast. His chair rolled back and hit the credenza. "You're going to take her word, her tin, she's an assistant. Grant, she formats my slides. Explain the drift." Eleanor said one more time, almost softly, almost as a mercy. "Explain it right now, in one sentence, and you can stay." Kane stood in the middle of the boardroom, with 12 years of other people's work behind him, and nothing of his own to say. His mouth worked. Nothing came. And that was the whole sentence he had, the empty one, and it walked him out of the room more surely than any hand on his arm. He grabbed his laptop, the one with the drift chart on it, the slide where the axis was mislabeled. Days where it should have said weeks, a mistake a real engineer would have caught in a heartbeat. He grabbed it, and he left, and the door did not slam, and somehow the softness of it closing was worse. No one filled the space where he'd been. "Priya," Eleanor said, "what do you need to make this clean?" "Time," Priya said. "A proper license from Ms. Bellamy, negotiated by real counsel of her own choosing, not this company's. The royalty paid current, the $24.5 million before anything else moves, and a decision from Miss Bellamy about whether she wants to be part of what happens next, or simply be paid and walk away. That's her right. Either one." They all looked at her again. The woman with the tin. Nora reached into it. She lifted out the first patch, the little hand-soldered square, and she held it up so the morning light off the Austin sky caught it. "Sam and I built this at 2 a.m. in a garage that smelled like solder and burnt coffee," she said. "We built it because his sister died of a low she slept through, because she hated needles and stopped checking. And he decided nobody's sister should have to bleed 4 times a day to stay alive. That's what this is. That's what you've been selling. Not my architecture. Trevor's not here. So let me say it plainly to the people who are. It was never about a magazine cover or $3.1 billion. It was about the kid who's scared of the needle. It was about the diabetics it was built for." She put the patch back in the tin. She did not close the lid. "I don't want to walk away," she said. "I want the royalties, all of them, and I want a fair license. And I want one more thing, and it isn't money." "Name it," Eleanor said. "I want to be in the room," Nora said. "From now on. Not with the coffee. At the table. With the authority I had before someone decided I was easier to erase than to listen to. Give me that, and you can have your offering." Grant Halloran, who had never in his life needed anything from an assistant, looked down the long table at her, and he nodded. Because there was nothing else in the world he could do. "Done," he said. Priya was already typing. "Then I'll suspend the diligence clock, and we reconvene when Miss Bellamy has her own counsel. Nobody wires anything today." She glanced up, one dry look around the table. "And somebody should probably take that patent plaque out from behind the ficus in the lobby. It's been trying to tell you this for 12 years. 6 months later, the light in the new lab came in low and gold through the tall windows, the way afternoon light does in Austin when the heat finally lets up. The plaque was not behind the ficus anymore. It hung by the lab entrance, cleaned, level, where everyone who came in had to pass it. It read her full name now. Nora Bellamy. Okafor. Chief inventor. And beside it, in a shallow frame she'd chosen herself, sat the first patch, the ugly hand-soldered one. 2 a.m. made permanent, hung where the light could reach it. The IPO had happened on day 10 after all, once the license was signed and the royalties were paid. $24.5 million into an account with her name on it, and a per-unit royalty going forward. 4% of net sales, in perpetuity, honored now the way it should have been honored all along. She had not taken the CEO's chair when, months later, it quietly came open. She had not wanted it. She had taken the title she wrote on the offer letter herself and made them accept. Chief inventor. And with it a lab and a team. And the one thing she'd lost 4 years ago and cared about more than the money. Safety authority. The final word on the corners nobody was allowed to cut. Trevor Kane was gone. There had been no scene about it in the end. No security, no drama. There rarely is. A man walks out of a room he can't explain his way through. And then one day, he just isn't listed anymore. She'd gotten an email that morning, forwarded up the chain, a small internal note correcting the credit on an old engineering doc. Where it used to say Kane's sensor architecture, it now said, simply foundational work by N. Okafor. She read it once and forwarded it to no one and got back to work. Grant Halloran was still the face of the company, still telegenic, still 6 months on, unable to explain why the enzyme layer didn't drift. She'd heard him try, once, at an investor call, and she'd let him finish the wrong answer. And afterward she'd sent him the right one in 2 clean sentences, no comment attached. He'd written back one word. Thanks. She believed he even meant it. There was a demo that afternoon. A community thing. Families. A diabetes education group from a clinic across town. Nora didn't have to run it. She ran it anyway. She liked the room where the work met the people it was for. A girl came up to her afterward. 15, maybe 16, the Lumen already on her arm under her sleeve. She pushed the sleeve up to show it, the little patch, the descendant of the ugly one in the frame. I used to pass out at the needle, the girl said. Every time. I stopped checking. My mom used to cry about it. She touched the patch. I haven't had a needle in a year. Did you really make this? I really did, Nora said. That's so cool, the girl said, with the total flatness of a teenager delivering the highest compliment she owns. And then she went to find her mother, and that was that. And it was everything. That evening Daniel had something to tell her. He waited until dinner, which meant it was big, because Daniel's important news always waited for food. Mrs. Alvarez did the jobs thing again, he said, where everybody says what their parents do. And? I didn't say you helped the smart people this time. He was working very hard to sound casual, which meant it was the opposite of casual. I said my mom invented the thing everyone uses. The patch. The one Riley's brother has. I said my mom's the chief inventor and she made it in a garage at 2 in the morning. He looked up. Was that okay? Nora had to wait a second before she could answer, because her throat had done something. That was okay, she said. That was exactly right. Riley didn't believe me. So I showed her the website. Your name's on it now. With your picture and everything. He shrugged. Gone casual again, the news delivered. Can I have more? She gave him more. Later, after he was asleep, she stopped by the lab on her way home, the way she'd started doing, just to walk through it empty. She stood at the entrance in front of the plaque and the framed patch, the little ugly square that a dying man had insisted go in her name alone, because he understood something she'd taken 12 years and one boardroom to learn. The work does speak. It's true, what she told herself for 4 silent years. The work speaks for itself. But it turns out that isn't quite enough. The work speaks. And sometimes, you have to be in the room when it does. You have to set down the coffee and open the tin and say the name out loud. Because a plaque behind a ficus can wait 12 years and never once be read. She reached up and straightened the frame, out of habit, the old habit, the one from the lobby, the small caretaking gesture of a woman keeping something tidy that no one else noticed. Except this time she wasn't looking at the corner of the frame to level it. This time she looked at the name. If you've ever been the quietest person in the room, the one everyone looked past, I hope this found you at the right time. Tell me in the comments the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels.